In the UI, our user can now enter their email address and password, but they can't yet trigger the authentication flow outside of the keyboard operations. To make this possible, we're now going to add a button that allows them to perform this authentication flow using the credentials that they have entered into the form. We'll start here by creating a new composable function in the corresponding file, and we'll call this Authentication button. Next, we're going to add a button composable. This requires two properties to be provided. This is an on-click callback along with the content. So that we can show some content inside of our button, we need to know what the current authentication mode is, so we'll add this as an argument to our button. We're then going to compose the content of our button based on this field. However, we're going to be displaying a different message based on whether the user is currently signing up or signing in. To handle both of these states, we're going to add two new resources to our strings file, one for sign up and one for sign in. Next, we'll compose a text composable and use an if statement to set the string resource based on the current authentication mode. We're also then going to quickly add a preview for our button just so we can see what this looks like. Now we've implemented the body of the function, we need to handle the click callback. What we want to do here is trigger an event that will start the authentication flow, similar to how we have handled other events in this project. We're going to allow the parent to handle this. With this in mind, we'll add a lambda function argument to our composable on authenticate, and then we'll trigger this lambda within the on-click argument of our button composable. Now when our button is pressed, the authentication flow will be triggered and the credentials from our text fields will be used during the process. However, these fields might not always contain valid data. We have an enable authentication property within our authentication state reference. So that we can toggle the button's enabled state, we're going to add a new argument to our composable function called enabled authentication. We're then going to set the enabled flag of our button to this property value. We'll update our preview too so we can see what this looks like. However, now that we've added this property, before we can carry on, we need to satisfy its requirements elsewhere. So hop back up to our authentication form and add a new argument to the composable, which we can pass directly into our authentication button, and then again up to the parent of the authentication content. We have this isFormValid function, and this tells us whether or not the user can currently authenticate. So we'll pass the result of this directly into the composable for this value. Now, if we update our preview, we'll be able to see the button being composed inside of our UI. If the content of the form is valid, this button will be enabled. If the form is not valid, then this button will show grayed out in its disabled state.